Chapter 392. She glared at the man in front of her. When have you ever let yourself be taken advantage of? Tell me, what are you up to this time? No other ideas, or doesn't feel sorry for me. Looking at his aggrieved expression, Shun Yueji's heart softened. She quickly touched his face. Okay, I'm afraid of you. Tell me, does it still hurt? Did you see a doctor and apply medicine? The man shook his head. Shun Yueji glared at him. Then what do you want? Kiss me. Shun Yueji's face immediately heated up when she realized that he was asking her to kiss him there. Yet, this man looked so serious and said such serious words. Looking at his serious face, it was as if she was the one who thought wrong, and the man was just saying it casually. After helping him put on his clothes, Shun Yueji began to eat the roasted rabbit meat. Forget it, I don't feel sorry for you anyway. If you want to die, go ahead. If you die, I will remarry. Imo Wushang was speechless. Looking at the little woman he missed sitting in front of him and eating with relish, the man's dark eyes were deep and dark. She really didn't care about him? In this barren mountain, Shun Yueji suddenly realized that although the man was not good at cooking, he was quite good at roasting things. She did not know what he had sprinkled on the rabbit meat, but it did not taste sweet. Instead, it tasted moderate and especially delicious. Imo Wushang, are you busy now? The man replied angrily. Not busy. Not busy? Since you're not busy, then go catch another rabbit for me to roast. You're not going? If you don't want to go, then forget it. After eating, I will go catch one myself. Anyway, there are many wild beasts in this barren mountain. If you are not worried that I will be. Before she could finish, she saw the man suddenly stand up, obviously to catch a rabbit. As he stood up, Shun Yueji quickly stood up and ran in front of him, blocking his way. Imo Wushang stood where he was and stared at her for a while. He frowned in confusion. Go and catch it now. Clean it, and come back to roast it. You're almost done eating. Shun Yueji didn't say anything. Instead, she raised her greasy little hand and suddenly wrapped it around the man's neck. Her little mouth covered in rabbit grease sealed the man's thin lips. Feeling the man's tall and sturdy body, she was startled. Shun Yueji stopped and then left the man's lips. Is it delicious? For some strange reason, the man nodded stiffly. Shun Yueji's eyes carried a smile. She moved closer and bit the man's thin lips again. Does the wound on your chest still hurt? The man shook his head. Then, Shun Yueji kissed him again. Do you still think I have no conscience? Yes. This time, the man reacted quickly. Shun Yueji stuffed a mouthful of rabbit meat into his mouth and said, Good boy. Let's go catch some rabbits. The man's handsome face softened and he calmed down. His beautiful lips curved slightly. I'll be back soon. Wait for me here obediently and don't run around. Looking at the man's back as he left, Shun Yueji could not help but smile. This man, he was really. Sometimes when he lost his temper and let his temper run wild, she actually felt that he was damned cute. And Shun Yueji also found that no matter how angry this man was because of her, as long as he was kissed and coaxed by her, he would immediately recover. Chapter 393. Shun Yueji realized that she didn't feel cold at all. She didn't know if it was because of the barbecued meat, but she felt warm in her heart and body. Shun Yueji didn't know if it was because of her quarrel with the man, but she didn't feel cold at all. Instead, she felt warm in her heart and body. Your Majesty, there is a secret report from the palace. There is an urgent matter that requires you to return to the palace as soon as possible. Above the Broken Heart Cliff, Feng Jiuqing's bloody clothes had been cleaned, and even the wounds on his body had been bandaged. It had been nearly 4 hours since Shun Yueji fell off the cliff. The secret guards he sent down to search for her were still nowhere to be found. Qiu Yang saw him like this and remembered the important secret report from the palace. He couldn't help but remind him, Your Majesty, Imperial concubine Shan is a good person. She will be fine. Dozens of well-trained and highly skilled secret guards have gone down from here to search for her, but now there is no trace of her. Yueji is just a woman. No one knew better than him how high the Broken Heart Cliff was. He originally had his own plan, But he didn't expect that Shun Yueji didn't follow his original plan. He thought that all women in this world were afraid of death. They liked glory and wealth and relied on their husbands. Even Gu Yueqin, who used to be the center of everything, was nothing more than this. So he felt that she was boring, even if she liked him, to the point that she would give everything for him. But he didn't love her. Perhaps he still cared about her a little. He cared about how much she cared about him and how much she liked him. He cared about how obedient she was. Perhaps, in his heart, she was still better than those women. After all, she had been with him since he had nothing. But he also didn't expect that a daughter born in a family of generals, who had lived a luxurious life since childhood, who had never suffered any hardships or suffered any grievances, would be willing to die to protect him. Even Gu Yueqin couldn't do it. A few years ago, he held Gu Yueqin's hand. She was also at the bottom of the broken heart cliff, looking at his body full of injuries. She also cried and begged him to let go. But at that moment, how could he really let go? Even though his body was in pain, even though countless wounds had opened up, he did not let go of her hand. It was just that his plan was to pull her up from the bottom. He wanted her to devote all of her loyalty to him. But Shun Yueji, however, she pried open her fingers and pried open his fingers one by one. Then, she fell off the cliff. Feng Juqing didn't know what was going on, but he felt like he was possessed by a demon. It was like he was in a dream. He was so deep in a dream that he couldn't tell if the scene before him was something that had happened a few years ago, or if it was something that was happening right now. Emperor? Qiuyang looked at him worriedly. Of course, he also knew that Shen Yueji would be smashed to pieces if she fell off this high cliff. But he was still a little shocked when he saw Feng Juqing's appearance. The emperor had always been the center of the court affairs. All these years, he had always kept it in his heart. Even the former empress didn't let the emperor put aside the government affairs and put her in charge. Chapter 394. Your Majesty? Qiuyang was worried, so he called out again. Feng Juqing seemed to come back to his senses. His eyes were scarlet and bloodshot. Your Majesty, imperial concubine will be fine. She is so kind and I believe that God will take care of her. Li Yingying got out of the carriage. She still had a lingering fear after what had happened just now. Her face was pale. Naturally, she had seen the scene where Shan Yueji fell off the cliff to protect her man. She was shocked. She had suspected that she had no feelings for the emperor, but now she was willing to die for him. Since she cared about him so much, why did she bring her into the palace to seduce the emperor? Feng Juqing saw her familiar face. He didn't know what was wrong with him. Suddenly, he stepped forward and took Li Yingying into his arms. Hugging her tightly, he hugged her tightly. He had always been fearless in the face of danger, but today he lost his composure. Qiner, is that you? You're back? Your Majesty. Li Yingying couldn't breathe because of him. She started to struggle in his arms. Your Majesty, I'm Yingying. You've mistaken me for someone else. Your Majesty. When she saw Qiuyang behind him through the man's body, the latter covered his mouth and coughed slightly. He said respectfully, Your Majesty, there is an urgent matter in the palace that requires the emperor to return to the palace in time. Please help me persuade the emperor to return to the palace as soon as possible. Li Yingying knew that Qiuyang was talking to her, but she was shocked. She didn't know how to answer him. After all, she wasn't the real empress. Moreover, the emperor was conscious. He just thought she was the former empress at this moment. If she rashly. But when she met Qiuyang's pleading eyes, Umitba. Benefactor Qiu is right. Please help me persuade the emperor to return to the palace. Guard Qiu is guarding here. If Miss Shun is found, Guard Qiu will inform the emperor as soon as possible. Kong Yin got out of the carriage. He had seen so much excitement, but he didn't intervene. He had been watching the show with folded arms. Yesterday, he had already told Shin Yueji everything. He believed that Shin Yueji's choice was all within her plans, but he had never imagined that she would put on such a show. She was returning everything that Feng Juqing had given her. He couldn't help but rejoice that he had chosen to rely on this woman. Sure enough, after 9 years of marriage, in terms of understanding, he really couldn't compare to Shin Yueji. Seeing that even the emperor's most valued great master Kong Yin was begging her, and seeing the young emperor's pitiful appearance, Li Yingying couldn't bear to see him like this. She gathered her courage and reached out to caress the man's back. Your Majesty, let's return to the palace first. Nothing will happen to the imperial consort. Bodyguard Xiao will be here to guard her for you. General's Mansion. From the moment the Emperor's carriage was attacked on the Broken Heart Cliff to the moment Shen Yueji fell off the cliff, the people in the General's Mansion immediately received the news. However, at this moment, the General's residence was as stable as Mount Tai. No one was anxious. I never thought that the Prince Regent would go in person. General, madam, what do you think? Did the son-in-law do well this time? Double Happiness dutifully poured tea for them. Shang Guanyu's thin lips moved slightly, and it took him a long time to say something. He squatted in front of Shan Yueqi and held his shoulders with his big palms. Tell me, she's not real. Jier's not real. His strength made Shan Yueqi's face change color. If he had not cried for a long time and had no strength, he would have slapped him back. Chapter 397. He saved him from the claws of the beast. It was as if he knew that he was following him. He did not turn around to look at him, nor did he speak to him. He continued to murmur the same words that he had said along the way. He continued to walk forward. When he passed by a patch of water, he did not know how deep the water was and walked straight. As a result, he almost drowned. He was so frightened that he quickly jumped into the water and fished him out. He pressed on his chest to let him breathe. He was already a soulless body. This time, he couldn't move. It was even scarier. Fortunately, he saved him in time. The man was fine. When he woke up, he pushed Shang Guanyu away immediately and continued to stumble forward. Shen Yueqi had no choice but to follow Shang Guanyu to the end. He had walked for a long time with Shang Guanyu, and there was no path on the cliff. When Shen Yueqi saw Shang Guanyu jump down, he was shocked and hurriedly used his lightness skill to catch him. In short, Shen Yueqi felt like he was going to be crippled. He even regretted following him. Why did he follow him? Why didn't he just let him die? Damn it! Was this man so fragile? He was so fragile that he was about to die. He couldn't live without his woman, could he? Although he couldn't live without his sister, she was his sister. They were different. Finally, he reached the place he wanted to go, the Broken Heart Cliff. His white robes were no longer clean. They were covered in dust and dirt. Even his handsome face had many scratches and scratches. His arm was covered in blood. It was hard to tell if his arm was still intact or broken. He stood at the top of the Broken Heart Cliff, looking down at the smoke-shrouded cliff. Why did you save me? Shen Yueqi was speechless. My father and your father are old friends. If something happens to you, how are we going to explain to your father? You're the only son your father has. Speaking of this, Shen Yueqi couldn't help but sigh. Shang Guanyu, can we not be so weak? They were all men, and men were supposed to achieve great things. Was there a need to spend all this effort on romance? If my sister dies, you won't be able to live, right? Tell me, aren't you ashamed? Ashamed? Ha! Shang Guanyu smiled weakly. From the moment I followed Jier tirelessly, I didn't know what shame was. He turned around and saw Shen Yueqi's disdainful face. He smiled. Young Master Shen, you must have no idea what it feels like to be in love. That feeling, when facing the person you love, you can only hope that everything is good for her. If you love her, you can become a demon for her. You can go crazy for her. In the past, I tirelessly followed behind her. Even though I knew that she didn't like me, hated me, or even loathed me, I was still diligent and happy. As long as I could see her every day, it was a kind of satisfaction to me. Do you know, when I see her holding a whip in disgust and waving it at me? Chapter 398. When the whip in her hand hit me mercilessly, I felt the pain of the whip. That kind of pain was like a pain that penetrated deep into my bones. It was so painful that it was hot and scalding. However, I turned this pain into love and joy. As long as I remembered that she was the one who hit me with the whip, I could not feel the pain anymore. All I could think about was her. When she hit me, I was not angry at all. I was not angry at all. Instead, I thought that she was very cute when she was angry. She has always been so obvious when it comes to whether she likes or dislikes someone. When she likes someone, she can devote all of her passion and joy to them. But when she hates someone, just like how she treats me, she can be merciless and completely reject me. She thought that as long as she was fiercer and more ruthless to me and hit me harder with her whips, I would one day back off after losing face and suffering in her hands. But she was wrong. Not only would I not back off, when her whips hit me harder and harder, it was like helplessness in my heart that I couldn't get what I wanted. It was like a branding iron that left a deep, heavy mark on my body. It was so deep, so heavy that it reached into my bones. Brother Shin, after thinking about it, his voice suddenly became hoarse and deep, mixed with deep pain. In order to get her, I used all kinds of means. Perhaps some of the means were unworthy of my identity and made it difficult for me to raise my head in capital city. However, I did not regret it. Even if I almost hurt her, I was willing to use the rest of my life to make up for it. But now, after learning that she's no longer in this world, I know that I was wrong. How wrong I was. It turns out that loving someone means making her live a good life instead of blindly trying to get her. In order to get her, I did so many things that hurt her. I thought that I was the only one who could give her happiness in this world, so I destroyed all the illusions that she liked. Before, I didn't understand why I was so good to her and why she still hated me so much. I could tolerate everything about her, no matter if she was stubborn or stubborn. Later on, when I saw her with Imo Wushang, I was filled with hatred. I don't understand. I've been so good to her. Why does she hate me so much? Why does she want to reject me? She keeps saying that she's the emperor's woman and doesn't want to implicate me and my Shangguan clan. But why can she be with Imo Wushang? That man wanted to kill her. She's actually willing to stay by his side and accompany him without any complaints or regrets. At that moment, I couldn't deny the anger and jealousy in my heart. Why can Imo Wushang do it, but why can't I? I just want to be by her side, and when she needs me, she can see me whenever she turns her head. But she's stingy now, so she wants to take back even this little bit. Shinyuechi, tell me, my heart isn't made of iron. I've sacrificed for so long, for so many years, and suffered so much coldness and discrimination. I have no regrets, but when another man is accepted by her, I also feel pain, jealousy, and jealousy. Chapter 399. Why was she already dead before he could even make a move? She didn't even give him a chance to take her back. She just left and disappeared, as if she didn't exist. Jeer, do you really hate me that much? In your heart, you hate me so much that I didn't even have a little chance. You made me, just when I finally made up my mind to get you. You decisively chose to die instead of giving me the chance to do so. Shun Yuechi looked at his heartbroken expression and sighed in her heart. Compared to him, her nonsense really paled in comparison. Hey, brother Shangguan, there's always a chance. Although my little sister fell down, we don't know if she's alive or not. We haven't found her body, so maybe she's still alive. His words rekindled Shangguan Yu's hope. He looked at him for a while, and then withdrew his gaze. There was only a touch of sarcasm at the corner of his mouth. He suddenly laughed. How is that possible? To fall from such a high place like Broken Intestines Cliff, even a Jianghu martial artist with great martial arts might not be able to survive, let alone a weak woman like her. In that kind of dangerous situation, she was not prepared at all. What if she did? Shinyuechi anxiously continued his words. Brother Shangguan, you know that my little sister has always been smart and has a lot of wicked ideas. She's never willing to let herself be at a disadvantage. She's such a smart person and has so many wicked ideas. How could she throw away her life without any preparation? How could she defend herself in that kind of situation? Shangguan Yu looked at him. Brother Yuechi, you don't have to say anything. I know what you're worried about. You're worried that if I die on this heartbroken cliff, your general's mansion won't be able to explain it to my father. It doesn't matter. My father and mother are sensible people. They know how I feel about Jier. Now that Jier is gone, they should have known that I would make such a choice. Don't worry, my father and mother won't blame you. Shangguan Yu's words had already made Shan Yuechi understand what he wanted to do. His previous guess was not wrong at all. He was indeed courting death and wanted to follow his sister. Shinyuichi was very glad that he had caught up. Otherwise, because of Jier's joke, an innocent life would have been lost. He didn't know what he was feeling right now, but when he saw Shangguanyu really turn around and jump off the cliff, he couldn't tell what he was feeling right now. Jier, I've come to accompany you. We can't be together in this life, but I hope that after death, I will die with you in the same place, so you won't be lonely. No, brother Shangguan, Jier is not dead. Shinyuichi anxiously shouted at him, but Shangguanyu just smiled and didn't believe it at all. His good-looking lips curled into a smile as he glanced at Shinyuichi's face, which was slightly out of control due to shock. Brother Yuichi, is there any meaning in lying to me just to keep me alive? You should know that for so many years, I've lived for Jier. Jier is dead, and I've long been like a walking corpse in this world. It's better to let me go down to accompany her. It's so dark underground, and she must be afraid, so only I can accompany her. Chapter 400. Shinyuichi found that his head was really swollen now. He found that this guy was a bit stupid. No wonder his sister didn't like him. If he was so stupid, it would be strange if she liked him. He hesitated on the spot. He had just said that Yuji was not dead in a moment of desperation. He was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and tell Shangguanyu everything later. After all, Jier had told him that only the people of the general's mansion could know, and no one else could know. But if he didn't say it, the cold wind blew on his face, making him feel cold. While he was hesitating, the white blood-red robe suddenly jumped. Shinyuichi was shocked and cursed out loud. Then, he saw the snow-white figure falling straight down. He was shocked and rushed down without thinking, jumping down the cliff with him. When he finally grabbed the corner of Shangguanyu's clothes, Shangguanyu felt someone pulling him and opened his eyes. He almost couldn't believe that Shinyuichi also jumped down with him. Brother Yuichi, he pursed his lips. At this moment, he didn't know what to say. His heart was in a mess. Jier was dead. He had no hope of living, but he was the only one who wanted to die. He didn't want to drag Shinyuichi down with him. Uncle Shin and Auntie Shun had just lost their beloved daughter. It was hard for them to accept seeing their daughter die before them. If Shinyuichi were to leave them now, he didn't know if their bodies would be able to take it. He grabbed Shinyuichi's wrist and wanted to send him up with the last bit of internal force. The wind was too strong at the bottom of the cliff, especially when they were falling straight down. It was too fast for Shinyuichi to bear. His face was almost distorted by the wind. He threw himself into Shangguanyu's arms and cried bitterly. Wait for me to finish talking. Jump, I don't want to die yet. You bastard, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Don't think about reincarnating. I'll pester you to death. Brother Yuichi. Shangguanyu looked at him with mixed feelings as he threw himself into his arms, his hands holding his waist tightly, and he had no strength left to send him up. In the past, only women would throw themselves at men. In the past, there were many women who did the same to him, but because he only had Jier in his heart, he would usually reject them completely. Of course, there were a few women who didn't stop them. They were from aristocratic families and took advantage of the moment when he was unprepared. But for a man, this was definitely the first time Shangguanyu had experienced this. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. He just looked at Shinyuichi and listened to the whistling wind and his painful cries. He didn't know whether he should hug him or not. He just stood there, not knowing what to do. Shinyuichi didn't feel him hugging her for a long time. She was so scared that she took the initiative to grab his hand and hug herself as they fell. Shangguanyu, I'm warning you. When we reach the bottom, you'll fall under me and be my cushion. It doesn't matter if you're smashed to pieces, but even if I die, I want to die a beautiful death. I can't die like a piece of meat. You, brother Yuichi, let go of me. I can send you up. Chapter 401. He almost burst into tears, wiping his tears and snot on Shangguanyu's body. Shangguanyu, do you think I dare to let go of you in this situation? I'm heavier than you, and I'll fall faster than you. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. You want me to be your human cushion? You want to fall to the ground yourself? I'll fuck your grandma. You'd better give up on this idea as soon as possible. Let me tell you, I'll never let you get what you want. Shun Yuechi deeply felt that his little universe was about to explode at this moment. Damn Shang Guanyu. I'm going to die with him, but he still has such an idea. He buried his head in Shang Guanyu's arms and cried, "My poor father and mother are going to die before me." Sob, I don't know if they will shed a few tears after I die, or will they hold a big banquet and think that they can finally stop worrying after I die. Sob, 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 brother Yuechi. Shang Guanyu was speechless as he looked at the back of his head, crying in his arms and gasping for breath. If you let go of me now, I can really send you up. If you wait any longer, it'll be too late. I'm the one who wants to die. I don't want to drag you down. You're the only son of uncle and aunt. You're not the only son of the Shangguan family. Shang Guanyu was rendered speechless by him. After a long time, he looked at the cliff above in silence. I've made up my mind. Brother Yuechi, you don't need to persuade me anymore. I've made up my mind. If you dare to let go of me, I'll keep jumping. Anyway, I'm heavier than you, and I'll fall faster than you. Hearing his half-threatening tone, Shang Guanyu, who was about to stop him, paused. He looked at him and sighed silently. Brother Yuechi, if you're unwell, even if I meet Ji-er in the underworld, I won't be able to face her. She hates me. Please don't make things difficult for me. Sob, the problem is that you can't see her down there. We can only see the king of hell down there. Brother Yuechi, Shang Guanyu, why didn't you believe what I said? I already said that Ji-er is not dead. Ji-er knows what she's doing. She was prepared before she did this. But you fucking tricked me to death. I'm really going to die. Bang. As Shun Yuechi complained, there was a sudden bang. What happened to them? With both feet on the ground, Shun Yuechi bounced a few times on the ground. He looked at Shang Guanyu in disbelief, then looked at Shang Guanyu again. Just like him, Shang Guanyu, who was also safe and sound, revealed a surprised expression when he saw that the other party's expression was the same as his. The broken heart cliff was so high that falling from it would definitely result in one's death. However, not only were they fine, they even landed safely on the ground. Not only that, didn't they land a little too quickly? Shun Yuechi looked at his feet suspiciously and was shocked. There was no ground at all. There was clearly a layer of hazy fog below, and he couldn't see anything clearly. It was really scary to look at. Cough, cough. The sound of coughing came from behind them. Shin Yuechi and Shang Guanyu both turned around and saw Ji Chu covering his mouth and looking at them awkwardly. Chapter 402. The two of them behaved intimately, sticking close to each other. If one of them was a woman, they would definitely be lovers who would go through life and death together. But they were two men. That was why Ji Chu suddenly coughed. Ji Chu wasn't surprised by their appearance, especially Shang Guanyu. However, he didn't expect Shun Yuechi to appear here, so he was greatly surprised. Young Master Shangguan, eldest young master. He greeted the two of them. Seeing him, Shang Guanyu's mind flashed with countless conjectures. Finally, he mocked himself. He didn't doubt that it was Ji Chu who saved them. But Ji Chu was Imo Wushang's bodyguard. If he was here, did it mean that Imo Wushang was here too? He mocked himself because he thought he was the first to arrive when Ji-er was in trouble. But he didn't expect that Imo Wushang would always be one step ahead of him. His emotions probably affected Shun Yuechi, who was beside him. Shun Yuechi jumped out of his arms and kicked him. Shang Guanyu staggered and almost fell to the ground. Luckily, Ji Chu caught him in time. He barely managed to stand up. Shang Guanyu, is there something wrong with your brain? I told you just now that Ji-er is fine. She's alive and well. You didn't believe me and insisted on jumping down with me. Not only is there something wrong with your brain, I think your IQ is 0. Shang Guanyu was speechless. Although he was in deep grief, he wasn't completely mindless and had lost his memory. Shin Yuechi said that he was the one who insisted on jumping down with him. Shin Yuechi didn't even look at him. He was still throwing a tantrum. It's all thanks to Bodyguard G's sudden appearance. If it weren't for Bodyguard G's sudden appearance and saving our lives, I would have been smashed to pieces along with you on this heartbroken cliff. By the way, Guard G, where's my little sister? Oh, Ji Chu glanced at Shang Guanyu and said respectfully, Miss Shan is with my master. Take me to her. Young Master Shun, please follow me. Is Ji really fine? If it was Shun Yueqi, Shang Guanyu wouldn't believe it. But if it was Ji Chu who said it, Shang Guanyu's eyes had been glued to Ji Chu from the moment Shang Guanyu asked Ji Chu. He didn't miss any expression on Ji Chu's face. Ji Chu smiled. Miss Shin is indeed safe and sound with my master. If young Master Shangguan doesn't believe me, you can go and take a look with this subordinate. Naturally, Shangguan would follow him to take a look. Right now, he didn't believe anyone, even if it was Ji Chu. However, he still had to confirm it, because Ji Chu had no reason to lie to him. In the cave, Shin Yueji consecutively ate 2 roasted rabbits. In fact, she was planning to let Mo Wushang catch the second one for himself. However, when he finished roasting it, he discovered that she had already finished the first one. Thus, he took the initiative to hand over the roasted rabbit to her. She ate all the meat, and the man only ate a few mouthfuls of her leftover bones and some bad meat. Seeing Mo Wushang's appearance, Shun Yueji felt a little upset. Thus, she changed her sleeping position and turned her back to him, planning to not look at him. She was so full that she didn't want to move. She rubbed her stomach and groaned, Mo Wushang. The man heard her and walked to her. He bent down in front of her and saw her hand on her bulging stomach. His little face was fierce. Chapter 403. I'm too full. I don't want to move. Give me a massage. The man obediently rubbed her belly, carefully and with just the right amount of strength. Is it very uncomfortable? What do you think? Shun Yueji rolled her eyes at him. Try eating 2 rabbits at once. And such a big rabbit. Mo Wushang. Rabbits are so cute. How can you eat them? Shun Yueji covered her face. She didn't know what she was doing. She just said whatever came to her mind. The man looked at her helplessly. Good girl. I brought the rabbits to you after I cleaned them outside. He was afraid that she would be reluctant to eat the rabbits because they were so cute. So he asked Ji Chu to clean them up outside. It's not comfortable to sleep in the cave. When will the dog emperor come to me? I don't want to sleep here for the next few nights. Hearing her dissatisfied complaints, Mo Wushang rubbed her belly a little harder. Shin Yueji felt it. She slapped his hand away and glared at him. What are you doing? If you're not comfortable, you can sleep in my arms. I'll hold you to sleep. Shin Yueji squinted at his handsome face for a while and suddenly smiled. That won't do. I'll sleep for so long. What if your body becomes stiff? I'll feel sorry for you. She leaned over and kissed the man's beautiful face. Mo Wushang, will you sleep with me? The man's black eyes were full of warmth. He looked at her lovingly. Do you want to be alone?
Yes.
Shin Yueji nodded cooperatively. I feel very uncomfortable without you holding me to sleep. My heart is empty. Every morning when I wake up, I will subconsciously touch the bed, but I'm very disappointed when I don't touch you. Mo Wushang, do you think I'm sick? The man didn't speak but stared at her. Just when Shin Yueji thought he was going to do something, the man suddenly smiled. The man who didn't smile gave people the feeling of a cold sculpture. The sculpture was so perfect that it didn't look like a real person. In the end, it lacked a trace of warmth. When he smiled, he was even more eye-catching and beautiful than a myriad of flowers blooming at the same time. In other words, even 100 flowers could not compare to his alluring smile. For a moment, Shun Yueji was stunned. She stared at him blankly. It was indeed rare for a man to be this beautiful. Mo Wushang. She reached out to touch his face, feeling his inhuman existence. Why are you laughing? Such a beautiful smile almost made her think that she was in a dream. It was so beautiful that it didn't seem like a real person. It seduced her so much that she lost 6 of her 7 spirits. In fact, Shin Yueji even had an illusion that if Mo Wushang hadn't liked her so strongly and had smiled at her, she might not have hated him so much. After all, there was no one in this world who wouldn't like such a good-looking man. Even if she already had Feng Juqing in her heart at that time. But, Jier can't leave me now? Hearing the man's explicit words, Shin Yueji coughed in a low voice and then turned her face away awkwardly. Don't talk nonsense. When did I say that I can't leave you? Don't flatter yourself. The man smiled and kissed her pouting lips. I was wrong. I can't leave Ji-er. Chapter 404. Shin Yueji blushed and burrowed into his arms. Ji-er, little sister. Two voices rang out from behind her. Shin Yueji was startled. She quickly got up from the man's arms and looked at the three men at the entrance of the cave. Like Ji Chu, she wasn't surprised that Shin Yueji was here. But why was Shang Guanyu here? From the moment he saw Shin Yueji, Shang Guanyu acted as if they didn't exist. He quickly stepped forward and looked Shin Yueji up and down. Seeing that she was really unharmed, he felt as if he had found a treasure after losing it. Even though he was in front of Imo Wushang, he still quickly walked in front of Shin Yueji and grabbed her hand, resisting the urge to hug her. Instead, he carefully looked at her and asked, Ji-er, is that really you? It's me. Shin Yueji was probably touched by the man's scarlet eyes. Although she didn't know what he had experienced during the time she jumped off the cliff, she could see that he was covered in blood. His arm was empty, and the wound on it was obvious that the blood had not stopped flowing. He had only been standing there for a while, but it was already stained with blood. Shin Yueji couldn't tell what she was feeling. She looked at Shang Guanyu and pursed her lips. I'm sorry. She did not know that Shang Guanyu would have such a reaction when he found out that she had jumped off the cliff. Even if she was very open-minded about such things, and even if she had a heart of stone, seeing Shang Guanyu's current state, she knew that he was in such a miserable state because of her. How could her heart not be moved by this? Moreover, compared to the previous Shang Guanyu, the way he looked at her today was so clear, pure, and careful. There was no strong possessive feeling in his eyes. Shin Yueji knew that he had changed a lot through this incident. She had never thought that her every move would cause him to care so much. This kind of love, from the intense possessiveness, to now only wishing for her to be well. Suddenly, she envied the original lord. In her eyes, she was so blessed. To have a family that loved her so much. To have a man who could abandon everything at any time for her. She was like a favored child of the heavens. You guys go out first. I have something to say to Shang Guanyu alone. Shin Yueji pushed the man beside her. Imo Wushang, can you go out first? I'll just have a few words with him. He'll be fine soon. Imo Wushang kissed her cheek. It was rare that he didn't make things difficult for her. He stood up and left. Shin Yueji hurriedly called out to him when she saw him leaving. Imo Wushang looked back at her. Shin Yueji blushed and returned his clothes to him. It's windy outside. Put on your clothes and be careful not to catch a cold. Imo Wushang returned the clothes to her and draped them over her shoulders. Compared to solitude, solitude wishes for your health to be fine. Looking at Shang Guanyu's pale face, Shin Yueji crossed his arms, shook his head and sighed. See? Why did my little sister choose the regent? This is the difference between the two of you. You always listen to Ji-er and let her beat and scold you. This will make Ji-er think that you are very useless and incompetent. The Prince Regent is different. Although he is also beaten and scolded, he has his own opinions on some things. For example, this matter of putting on clothes, even Ji-er can't do anything about it. Chapter 405. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I couldn't sleep at night, and I heard Ji Chu say that you were busy, so I came to see you. I've been out for so long. If the Emperor's people notice something, I'm afraid they will be suspicious. I should go back. She tried to make her face look indifferent. She turned around. Imo Wushang didn't get up to take her hand this time. But when Shin Yueji walked to the door, it was locked from the outside. She couldn't get out even if she wanted to. She turned around and glared at him. What are you doing? He wouldn't let her go. A coquettish fox was seducing him in the room, saying a few provocative words from time to time. The man was indifferent and didn't explain, but he still let her take advantage of him. Seeing her reaction, Imo Wushang's dark eyes flickered, and there was a layer of warmth in them. Ji-er, he is actually... Shang. Look at what kind of woman you found. Doesn't the little one know how to bow to the big one? He even dared to hit you. Come, let me take a look. Look at your face. Look at how badly you've beaten him up. The woman in red was so distressed that she wanted to throw herself into his arms. Her tone was sweet and charming. The man's cold eyes suddenly became cold and contracted. Even the aura in the room froze at this moment, as if it wanted to freeze 1 to 3 feet. The woman in red immediately stopped on the spot, not daring to take another step forward. However, her mouth was still unconvinced as she muttered, "What are you doing? You weren't like this in the past." In bed, you. Imo Wu Shang. This time, Xin Yueji was completely furious. She didn't have a whip in her hand. He should be glad that he didn't carry a whip with him. Otherwise, it wouldn't be his own hand that she used to whip him. She stretched out her foot and kicked the door several times. "I said let me out. Didn't you hear me? Hurry up and open the door." Her face was dark and cold, and even her tone was full of impatience. If you looked closely, you could see the crystal tears at the corner of her eyes. However, she forced herself to swallow it back. The man got up and strode to her, ignoring her struggle, and held her in his arms. His thin lips pressed against her soft ears, and he gently coaxed her, "Don't cry. Let me go." Xin Yueji struggled hard in his arms. He's a man, not a woman." This sentence caused Xin Yueji to be silent for a long time. Looking at her silence, Imo Wushang knew that she listened to his words. He put his thin lips on her pink neck and kissed it gently. "He's just... No wonder you can promise me that I'll be your only woman in the future, in the past and now. Imo Wushang, I was wrong about you. So you like men." Buffed. The man in red couldn't help but cover his mouth and burst into laughter. Hearing this laughter, Xin Yueji looked past Imo Wushang's stiff body to look at him. Imo Wushang said that he was a man. Chapter 406. The anger in her heart didn't lessen. Instead, it deepened. If she hadn't pushed the door open, this man would have jumped into her arms. And Imo Wushang didn't reject her. If she hadn't spoken up, perhaps the two of them would have hugged each other. Who knew? In the end, they might have rolled onto the bed together. "If you like men, tell me. Why are you pestering me? At least I'm straight." She didn't mind two men liking each other. She just couldn't accept it. To her, Imo Wushang would rather be with a woman than a man. "I won't disturb you anymore. It's not what you see. There's nothing going on between us." Imo Wushang felt a headache coming on, especially when he saw Xin Yueji's calm face. Although the anger was gone, her face was still unfamiliar and calm. This made Imo Wushang feel inexplicably anxious. "I'm talking to him about something. Can he almost talk about being in your arms and holding you together when we talk about it? Would a normal man call you a shang so intimately when talking about something?" The man in red, Imo Wushang. You don't have to explain. I understand. I knew you hated me for so long. You must have some ulterior motive for suddenly being so nice to me. Isn't your motive?" The man's voice was low. Xin Yueji's eyes reddened instantly. She stared at him. "You're being mean to me." The man choked and softened his tone helplessly. He hugged her and rubbed his chin against her restless head. "How can I be mean to you when I can't even wait to love you? Believe me, okay? I really only like you from the beginning. You really only like me. I'm the only woman you like. But you like men. Liking men is different from liking women." The man in red snorted a few times. Hearing him laugh, Xin Yueji couldn't help but stare at him. She narrowed her eyes dangerously. "Is it funny?" The man in red stopped laughing immediately and said with a serious face, "No." In his heart, he silently prayed for his friend of many years. What kind of troublesome daughter-in-law did he find? Look at this wild cat. Not only was it hard to coax, but it was also insatiable. Especially the slap he gave to Imo Wushang without any hesitation. He was still in a daze. Ever since he was young, who dared to hit him? Even those enemies who wished for Imo Wushang to die would not dare to even touch a single strand of his hair, let alone hit him. However, this woman was different. Not only did she hit him, but Imo Wushang did not get angry. Instead, he even had to lower himself to coax her. Not only was it hard to believe, but it was also inconceivable. Hong Fui. Imo Wushang lightly spat out 3 words from his thin lips. When the man in red heard his name, he immediately pricked up his ears, only to see the man lowering his head and explaining to Shun Yueji with a doting expression. He grew up with me. His personality is different from other men. He likes to cause trouble and is flamboyant. Don't lower yourself to his level. There's nothing between me and him. Shun Yueji was quiet for a moment. Then you two stayed in the same room in the middle of the night, and he was already charging at you. Why didn't you dodge? Chapter 407. Imo Wushang was the regent of the Feng country. In private, there must be a lot of things that couldn't be said in public. So Shin Yueji didn't ask much. She just listened to his explanation and went out. The man followed her out without hesitation. Why are you here suddenly? If you want to see me, ask someone in your mansion to tell me. It's windy outside. I'll go find you myself. It's nothing. I just suddenly wanted to see you. Now that I've seen you, I should go back. Before she turned around, the man's tall body pulled her into his arms again and hugged her tightly. Jeer. He hugged himself very tightly, so tightly that there was not a single gap left. What are you doing? Let go of me. I should go back. Shun Yueji felt uncomfortable being hugged so tightly by him. She didn't think about it and tried to break his hand. However, the man directly lifted her chin and kissed her. For a moment, her mouth was filled with the familiar smell of the man. The moment his lips and tongue came in, Shun Yueji opened her mouth subconsciously. He chased after her little tongue playfully and tangled with her. After the kiss, she gasped heavily. Being pulled into the man's arms gently, she heard the man's low laughter. I'm very happy. Shun Yueji's little face was a little red from the kiss. She leaned against his chest. The cold wind couldn't blow in, and the blush on her face didn't go away for a long time. If we encounter such things in the future, can't you explain it to me quickly? You're very happy to see me angry, aren't you? Because he wanted to see her jealous look. It looked very real, but it was very far away from him, like a dream. If he hadn't seen the tears at the corner of her eyes, Imo Wushang might have looked at her a little longer. She was angry, which meant that she had him in her heart and cared about him. That was why he wanted to see her angry look more. He wanted to know that he still had a place in her heart. Although it wasn't a deep place, he knew that she was not indifferent to his existence in her heart. At least she would feel uncomfortable when she saw him with other women, even if he wouldn't be with other women. It's going to be dawn soon. I should go back and pack up a bit. When dawn comes, I'll set off with His Majesty back to the palace. After staying in the man's arms for a while, Shin Yueji leaned against his chest, listening to his strong heartbeat, and spoke in a muffled voice. Actually, she didn't really suspect Imo Wushang. It was just that she was a little unhappy at that moment. Now that she knew about it, she was a little depressed that she had lost her composure. I'll send you back. Okay? No need. Don't the two of you have something to discuss? I can go back by myself. The man was silent for a while. Hong Fui did have something important to discuss with him. Looking at the little woman in his arms, it was obvious that she did not want him to send her back. He paused for a moment. Chapter 408. Then I will go back first. Jichu. Yes, master. TSK. This person has gone far. Did his soul follow him? Hong Fui crossed his arms and walked out of the room. He stopped in front of the man and teased him. Imo Wushang didn't look at him. Go back. I will not go with you. Hey. Hong Fui squinted his eyes dangerously. Imo Wushang, what do you mean? You promised to go back with me. Why should I go back alone? I will not be able to explain to the Empress Dowager. He saw that Imo Wushang was about to leave and quickly walked over to stop him. Imo Wushang, have you forgotten your identity? Have you forgotten your mission? After staying in the Feng Kingdom for so many years, do you really think of yourself as a citizen of the Feng Kingdom? Looking at the man's indifferent black eyes, Hong Fui's face turned cold. Did you fall in love with that woman just now? The answer was non-committal. The man raised his eyebrows. Hong Fui looked at him in disbelief. What about Gu Yueqin? Did you fall in love with Gu Yueqin? No. I know that Gu Yueqin was harmed because of the Empress Dowager. If you didn't leave Feng Nation at that time, perhaps that woman wouldn't have died at all. However, you have to remember that a person with a big goal shouldn't be tied down by love. Wushang, there are millions of people in the North Underworld. Are you going to watch them rely on an environment without a leader? The man didn't speak, but walked past him with a cold face. Hong Fui frowned. The Empress Dowager ordered you to leave with me tonight and rush back to the Northern Underworld. Otherwise, he paused for a moment. I know I can't beat you, but I will use all my strength to tie you up and bring you back. If you like that woman just now, I can tie her up for you and bring her back to the North Underworld. You can do whatever you want. Wushang, Gu Yueqin is dead. Now the North Underworld needs you. You have been fighting with the Empress Dowager for so long. It's enough. Don't forget that she is your mother, your biological mother. Don't touch her. If you dare to touch her, I will not let you go easily. After saying this, the man turned around and entered the room. Hong Fui wanted to follow, but just as he was about to step into the room, a strong inner force came from the room and the door closed with a bang. Fortunately, he reacted in time. He quickly took a few steps back and narrowly avoided getting his nose smashed. The Empress Dowager is your mother. During the time you were away from the Northern Underworld, she has been helping you with the affairs of the palace. The Empress Dowager is old and can't manage much for you. The Northern Underworld is your country. The ministers in the court and the people in the capital are all your people. I just feel that your master has been hiding too much from me. I'm a narrow-minded person, and I can't tolerate anyone lying to me. Furthermore, your master has promised me that he would never hide anything from me. If she hadn't bumped into him tonight, she probably wouldn't have known who Hong Fui was. She also wouldn't have known that Hong Fui was actually in contact with the people of the North Underworld. There are some things that Master doesn't want Miss Shun to know for her own good. After all, Miss Shun is a woman. The things about the Northern Sea and the Phoenix Nation. Even though she was old and faded, I still did not take a concubine. She, on the other hand, can't wait for me to take concubines. When I don't want them, she drugged me, stripped those women and sent them to my bed. She wants me to have concubines. She drugged me when I didn't want them. She stripped them and sent them to my bed. But this time, the words that came out of his mouth did not stop, as if he was pouring out all the grievances and unwillingness in his heart. Chapter 411. Heh, I'm raising someone else's bastard for her. What did I say? She. Gu Wei gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine when he mentioned the sad past. Shin Yueji wasn't in the mood to listen to them talking about the past. She just found it strange that they were still in the inn in the middle of the night. She didn't expect to hear this. At that moment, her hands were cold. An indescribable emotion overflowed, and she tightened her hands on the table. What did he mean by Morong Yun being unmarried and pregnant? What did he mean by he was raising another man's bastard for Morong Yun? She wasn't Gu Wei's child? Before Morong Yun married him, he was already pregnant with her? Thinking of her childhood in the Prime Minister's mansion, Gu Wei's love and indulgence among all the children, but she was the only one he didn't like. Shin Yueji finally understood that she wasn't his flesh and blood. It wasn't just because Morong Yun didn't like her, so he didn't like her either. It was because she wasn't born by him. She was born by Morong Yun and another man. According to Gu Wei's arrogance, how could he treat the woman he liked and the child born by another man? There was a teapot on the table. She felt her mouth was dry and poured a cup into her mouth. Then she poured a second cup. She was just curious when she saw them here, but she didn't expect to hear this. Speaking of which, Gu Yueqin is really pitiful. If it wasn't because her mother was pregnant with her, she might have eloped with that man and I wouldn't have anything to do with it. Her mother didn't like her, and she was a bastard born by another man. How could I like her? Heh. Every time I see Yun beating and humiliating her, I'm happy. That little bitch. It's a pity that she died too early. I didn't even have the chance to vent the hatred in my heart before she passed away so early. What a pity. When she mentioned Gu Yueqin, Gu Mujue's dark eyes suddenly contracted. For a moment, the atmosphere in the inn dropped a lot. But Gu Wei didn't seem to feel it. He was still smiling coldly. Gu Yueqin looks so much like that man. So much like him. He murmured and then drank a few mouthfuls of wine. Gu Mujue's deep gaze fell on the countless empty jars on the coffee table. The big hand under the brocade robe couldn't help but tighten. He wanted to help Gu Wei up. Father, you're drunk. I'll send you back. I'm not drunk. I'm not going back. You want me to go back and face your mother's cold face? Let me stay here. He let out a drunken belch. His vision became hazy, and he fell asleep on the table. From the beginning to the end, Gu Mujue didn't say anything unnecessary. Instead, she supported Gu Wei and walked out. When he reached the door, Shun Yueji didn't know if it was an illusion, but he purposely paused. When Shun Yueji looked up again, the man was already far away. She pinched her eyebrows and glanced at the jars of wine on the table. He stood up and left. If it had been anyone else here today, as long as it wasn't me, surely young Master Gu would have already killed her? Gu Mujue didn't say anything. She looked at her with her dark eyes. Your Gu family and my Shin family have always been at odds with each other in the capital. You still want me to help you hide it? She laughed coldly. Doesn't young Master Gu think that this is too wishful thinking? Her gaze subconsciously swept towards the wooden fox carving hanging on his waist. Chapter 413. His bloodless thin lips were pursed into a straight line. After a long time, she heard his cold voice. You can state your conditions. Shinyueji stretched out her white hand. Okay, this is what young master said. Give me the wooden fox in your hand, and I will pretend that nothing happened tonight, and I have not heard anything. She accurately saw the killing intent flashing in the man's eyes. Shinyueji smiled. What? You are not willing? Gu Mujue clenched the little fox in his hand. Wyatt? Seeing young Master Gu so nervous, I think this little fox is very important to you. Gold and silver jewelry are rare treasures in the world. According to my identity, I naturally do not lack them. On the contrary, the little fox worn by young Master Gu's waist is very attractive to me. I just don't know how sincere young Master Gu is. Young Master Gu. Shin Yueji suddenly approached him. In an instant, his nose was filled with the fresh fragrance of a young girl. The man frowned. Shin Yueji stood on tiptoe and blew hot air into his ear. It was ticklish and numb, with a giggle. I kindly remind young Master Gu that the Emperor returned to the capital this time and brought back a monk. It seems that intentionally or unintentionally, he wants to replace your Gu family's position in the court. What did you say? Shin Yueji shrugged slightly. How can you and I, an imperial concubine and a minister, see through the Emperor's mind? Now, the Gu and Shun families are like the sun in the sky in the capital. The Emperor is afraid, so he wants to get rid of them. Young Master Gu is a smart man. Sometimes, just by looking at a person, he can see their thoughts and thoughts. As for the Emperor, you have followed him for so many years, it seems that you should understand him a little. Imperial concubine Shen told me this. Aren't you afraid that I will expose you to the Emperor? You won't. Shin Yueji's bright eyes flickered a few times. If it was anyone in your Gu family, they would. But young Master Gu, you won't. I can see that you seem to dislike the Emperor. She already knew that Gu Mujue did not like Feng Juqing. On the surface, he was still respectful, but in reality, every time they met, the respect in his eyes did not reach the depths of his eyes. Instead, there was a layer of coldness. Even yesterday at the general's mansion, after Feng Juqing appeared, he did not say a word. His dark eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. In the past, Shin Yueji did not understand why Gu Mujue hated Feng Juqing so much. After she married Feng Juqing, she hated him for a long time because of Gu Mujue's dislike of Feng Juqing. Now, when she looked at him again, she didn't find him so annoying. Really? The corners of the man's lips lifted and he sneered. Although I don't like your Gu family, eldest young master is much better than those unreasonable people in the Gu family. That's why I'm still willing to talk to eldest young master. Why do you think the emperor's thoughts are so hard to understand? The important ministers of the two families are willing to sacrifice their lives for him. Their loyalty is so great that they want to dig out their hearts and show it to him. He, on the other hand, is still blindly suspicious and jealous, and even wants to get rid of him. By doing so, who knows how many officials' hearts have turned cold. Chapter 414. Young Master Gu, don't be so direct. This is not a cooperative relationship. I mean to protect our Shin family and the Gu family. What does the life and death of the Gu family have to do with me? The cold and decisive words made the smile on Shun Yueji's face freeze for a moment. What did Gu Mujue mean? Was he not a member of the Gu family? It was as if he saw the surprise on her face that she did not have time to hide. The man put one hand behind his back and stared at her for a while. If it is a cooperative relationship between us, I can consider it. If it is for the sake of the Gu and Shin families, then there is no need to mention it. Compared to the Gu and Shin families, Shun Yueji actually hoped to cooperate alone. In this way, the Shin family would not be involved and would not face danger. However, Gu Mujue's indifference to the Gu family's life and death was somewhat beyond her expectations. However, knowing his character, Shun Yueji didn't press him further. She still had some trust in Gu Mujue. He was different from those people in the Gu family who went back on their words. As long as he promised, he would definitely do it. He would never go back on his word, even if the two of them were on opposite sides. Shin Yueji suddenly twitched her lips and smiled. Well, since young Master Gu is so straightforward, then it is a personal cooperation between us. It has nothing to do with the Gu and Shin families, but I don't know. She paused. When the time comes, will young Master Gu be biased? I will do what I say. Since I have promised young Master Shun, I will not go back on my word. I know what Imperial Consort wants. Perhaps Imperial Consort doesn't know what I want now, but sooner or later, you'll know. Gu Mujue was indifferent. Shin Yueji really did not know what he wanted. He said he wanted the throne, but he was so indifferent to it. He said he wanted something else, but with his status, what could he not have? However, the fact that he agreed to cooperate with her so readily meant that Shun Yueji smiled slightly. At that time, if Prime Minister Gu wants to do anything to the Shin family, I hope young Master Gu can inform me. As long as the Shin family is honest, the Gu family will not do anything. Young Master Gu, what benefits do you want from me? Just say it. You only need to inform me of His Majesty's movements. You don't need to do anything else. Actually, young Master has found the wrong person regarding the Emperor's movements. I think that the Empress should be the clearest about it. If young Master wants to know about the Emperor's movements, when she saw the man's handsome brows, she suddenly narrowed her eyes, as if she was impatient. Shin Yueji nodded. All right. He returned from the inn. It was already dawn. Shin Yueji thought about it along the way. Why did she suddenly cooperate with Gu Mujue? It was completely subconscious. She couldn't fight against Feng Juqing by herself. Moreover, Imo Wushang was hiding something from her. He probably had a lot of things to do as well. She didn't want to disturb him at this time and distract him. In addition, Feng Juqing wanted to get rid of the Gu and Shen clans. The Gu clan was extremely loyal, and if Feng Juqing did not reveal his true colors, they would not believe him at all. However, Feng Juqing was the kind of person who, even if you were dead, would still think that he was a good person, a sage. She took a deep breath and recalled what Gu Mujue had said to her before she left. Sometimes, if necessary, she really needed to cooperate with Gu Mujue. Chapter 415. She said that she wanted to cooperate with him, but secretly, she just wanted to destroy them. And Gu Mujue seemed to have seen through her mind. He had purposely left the Gu family out of the picture, as if he would ignore her no matter what she wanted to do. Where did you go? The man's gentle voice, with a trace of hoarseness, was just waking up. Hearing this familiar voice, Shun Yueji suddenly turned her head. Feng Juqing came out with only a piece of clothing, and his hair was not tied up, a little messy. His fair face in the hazy sky had a different kind of beauty. His black eyes were as gentle as ever, and at this moment, he was looking at her tenderly. Shin Yueji subconsciously lowered her head. I couldn't sleep, so I got up and strolled in the yard. Speaking of this, she thought of something and hurriedly added, I didn't eat much last night, so I was suddenly hungry. I originally planned to go to the kitchen to get something to eat, but found that the servants were all asleep, so I planned to go out to buy something alone, but I didn't expect that the shops were closed, so I sat in an inn for a while. She explained everything that needed to be explained in one breath. Accurately, she saw the man's gentle eyebrows shake, and suddenly looked at her with a low smile. Why does Imperial Concubine's eagerness to explain give me the illusion that there is a ghost in her heart? This concubine is just being honest. If I knew this, I wouldn't have slept with father and mother. At such an old age, you are still so kind. Shin Yueji stopped talking in time, covered her mouth, blushed, and secretly squinted at the young emperor who was staring at her. Your Majesty, you woke up so early. Are you going to return to the palace now? I suddenly woke up and saw that the sky was a little brighter, so I came out to have a look. So your Majesty is the same as this concubine? Shin Yueji stepped forward, walked in front of him, and pulled his wide sleeve. Your Majesty, it's cold outside. Let's hurry into the room. What if you get a cold? Feng Juqing let her pull him. After taking a few steps, the man suddenly grabbed her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. I had wanted Imperial Consort to stay in the manor for a few more days, but Zhen has been away from the palace for so long, and there are a lot of trivial matters in the court that Zhen has to deal with. Your Majesty, this concubine understands. As the Emperor of Feng Country, Your Majesty is always busy with official business. Your Majesty has already given this concubine a few days to accompany father and mother. This concubine is already very satisfied. She leaned on the man's shoulder, her small face slightly red. Your Majesty treats this subject's concubine well. This subject's concubine knows. Your Majesty does not need to blame yourself. The man pinched her nose and said, It's good that you know it. I really don't want to make you feel wronged. Chapter 416. The man smiled and put down the teacup in his hand. In recent days, the rumors about the late empress have been spreading in the court. Zhen needs to ask Master Kong Yin to do a ceremony. When he mentioned Gu Yueqin, she could see the obvious pain in his eyes. It appeared quickly and disappeared quickly as well. It was fleeting. In Shin Yueji's words, it was just right. Shin Yueji restrained the obscurity in her eyes. Didn't His Majesty say that he doesn't believe in these nonsense? Why? Asking Kong Yin is just an explanation to the people in the palace. The man took a sip of tea. It's dawn. Does Imperial Consort have anything to say to General Shan and Shen Foreign? She knew that Feng Juqing was giving her a chance to say goodbye to Shen He and Shen Xiu. She hesitated for a moment but still nodded. Father and mother know that His Majesty is going back to the palace today. I will go and remind them. After leaving the room, Shin Yueji went all the way to Shen Xiu's room. She saw that both of them were dressed neatly, especially Shen He, who looked high-spirited. She frowned with some dissatisfaction. Father, did you forget that you are sick? How can His Majesty think that you are really sick when you look like this? That's right. It's all your fault. I almost forgot about it. Shen Xiu had been well-nourished last night and almost forgot that Shun He's attire was too incompatible. She ordered him to lie on the bed again. Shun He looked at them worriedly. Daughter, His Majesty is going back to the palace. Do you think His Majesty will be angry if Father lies down like this? No, His Majesty knows that Father is sick, so he doesn't need to get up to send him off. His Majesty asked me to come here to inform Father and Mother that there is no need to follow so many rules. His Majesty is going out incognito, so he should go back incognito. Shin Xiu understood her words. All right, Mother understands. Must be very careful when you go back. This time you are going out with His Majesty. I don't know how that little girl of the Gu family will bear a grudge against you. You must be more vigilant. If you can't handle it, then close the palace and wait for Father and Mother to rush over to save you. Mother Shun's love, whether it was in her heart or in her eyes, was undisguised. Shun Yueji's heart softens. She looks at her mother and smiles. Mother, don't worry. Your daughter will be fine. Not only your daughter, but also the Shun family. As long as your daughter is alive, the Shun family will never fall. Shun He wiped his tears in relief. Even after she had walked far away, his tears still hadn't stopped. Shin Xiu sat on the bed and looked at the man who usually shed blood on the battlefield without shedding tears. It's all our fault for protecting Ji too well. I don't know what kind of grievances she suffered in the palace, but she suddenly grew up. She felt gratified and sad at the same time. Tell me, what is Ji thinking? I can clearly feel that her dependence on the regent is much deeper than that of the emperor. Why does she still want to enter the palace? Isn't it better to stay at home? When you marry the prince regent, what do you know? Our daughter is eating from the bowl while looking at the pot. You have to choose a man like this. You have to try for a long time to see which one is good and which one is suitable. Hearing this, Shinshio couldn't help but glare at him. You talk too much. Every day you talk about your big principles. I don't know what kind of nonsense you were talking about. Chapter 417. Speaking of Shun Yueqi, Shinshio also looked sad. Who do you think our son is like? He's so useless. How good would it be if he was half as good as Ji? He cries for Ji all day long. Who would dare to marry him in the future? Speaking of which, Shinshio paused. Old thing, Yueqi is not young anymore. Have you thought about it? What kind of woman can you find for him to suppress him? Still able to suppress him? Shun He rolled his eyes at her. It's good enough that you don't despise him. Although our Shun family is a family of generals, and there is no shortage of wives, no woman dares to marry Shun Yueqi. When I raise Shuangxi, I plan to take her as my daughter-in-law in the future. Who knew that this little girl was so smart? She knew my plan and immediately followed Ji to Porti. She also became sworn sisters with Yueqi. Thinking of that scene, Shun He couldn't help but have a headache and scolded Shen Yueqi several times. This fool. Li Yingying was finally taken back to the palace by Shun Yueqi. When getting on the carriage, she deliberately let Li Yingying ride in the same carriage with them and specially asked Feng Jiuqing for his opinion. The man was reading at that time. After hearing her words, the big palm on the book seemed to pause slightly, and then he chuckled. As you say. After Li Yingying got on the carriage, she bowed carefully and respectfully. And the man also talked and laughed with Shun Yueqi as if she didn't exist in the carriage. When it came to calligraphy and some musical skills, she really couldn't compare with Li Yingying. When she signaled Li Yingying to interrupt, the man finally looked at her. Perhaps Li Yingying's answer satisfied Feng Jiuqing. When the man looked at her, there was a gentle smile on his lips. Being stared at by the man like this, Li Yingying couldn't help blushing. The gentle man was like an immortal from the heavens, gentle and elegant. He treated people gently and didn't have the airs of an emperor at all. He was more like a gentle son of a noble family. He treated people warmly and courteously. This concubine also just found out that Miss Li is also the daughter of an illustrious aristocratic family. It's only because of some accidents that your family has fallen into such dire straits. In terms of musical skills, Miss Li is much better than this concubine. The moment their eyes met, Shen Yueqi seemed to see her past self in Feng Jiuqing's gentle eyes. She still remembered that when she first met Feng Jiuqing, he had looked at her with this kind of gaze. When a man looked directly at a woman, the woman would feel a little uncomfortable. However, although Feng Jiuqing's gaze was looking at a person, it was not ostentatious and direct. In the depths of his pitch-black eyes, there was a polite smile. From time to time, there would be a faint smile on his gentle lips. Chapter 418. If your majesty likes it, this concubine, as an imperial concubine, has to do something. Otherwise, your majesty will subconsciously compare this concubine with Empress Sister and feel that this concubine is not as generous and narrow-minded as Empress Sister. When did Jin say that? The man slightly raised his eyebrows, and his eyes had already moved away from Li Yingying's charming and pretty face. It fell on Shun Yueji's serious little face. Your Majesty, there is an ambush. However, not long after his eyes fell on Shun Yueji's face, the reins of the carriage were suddenly tightened. The horse raised its head and roared, and the carriage shook violently. Li Yingying sat below. After all, she was a weak woman, not like Shin Yueji, who came from a family of generals. When the carriage shook violently, her center of gravity was unstable. She didn't know what to hold, and her body subconsciously fell towards Feng Juqing. Your Majesty, she exclaimed. The man frowned. One of his hands was holding onto Shun Yueji. The moment he saw her soft body pouncing towards him, his dark eyes wavered. He did not push her away, nor did he take the initiative to reach out to help her. Shin Yueji looked at the man's invisible, unfamiliar scene, and the corner of her lips slightly raised. Yes, this was the real Feng Juqing. To him, Li Yingying was just a stranger. She had no illustrious identity or background, and all she had was a face that was somewhat similar to hers. If Feng Juqing was willing to hold her, it meant that he still had some feelings for her, but he not only didn't, but also waited for her to fall. It was enough to show that the manly demeanor he should have made him unable to push her away. Li Yingying had no background to rely on, so he was too lazy to pay attention to her, even if she had a face that was somewhat similar to his. But for Feng Juqing, this was a woman without feelings, even if they had the same face. So what? He could still be so indifferent. Li Yingying was afraid of such a scene. The moment she fell into Feng Juqing's arms, she subconsciously hugged the man's waist, and her whole face was buried deep in the man's chest. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Her voice was soft, trembling, and there was still fear after the shock. The soft and fragrant jade in his arms made the man frown, but he symbolically held her slender waist and comforted her. It's okay. He pushed Li Yingying, who was in his arms, to Shun Yueji beside him and got off the carriage alone. Your Majesty, be careful. Shin Yueji couldn't help but remind him as she watched him get off the carriage. Feng Juqing turned around and looked at her. He smiled and nodded slightly in response. This place was Heartbroken Cliff. In the past, it had deepened her feelings for Feng Juqing to the point where she had no regrets. The scene from her previous life was about to repeat itself. Even her grip on Li Yingying's arm tightened. Previously, Li Yingying was acting when the horse was frightened, but this time, her hand was really hurting from Shin Yueji's grip. Shin Yueji's grip was really tight, and her long nails were digging deep into her flesh. She frowned in pain and said, Your Highness, did I make you unhappy just now? Hearing this, Shin Yueji released her. Seeing that the woman was in so much pain that the color of her pretty little face had almost changed, she seemed to have reacted, and with some guilt, she loosened the shackles on her. Sorry, I lost control of myself for a moment. Did I hurt you? Shin Yueji could even see herself from her past life through the scene before her eyes. When the sword was about to stab Feng Juqing, she shouted desperately to remind the man to be careful. Even she, who had no abdominal muscles, couldn't help but jump down from the carriage to stand in front of him and take the sword for him. This time it was as if the gods were at work. Shin Yueji did not say anything. Halfway through, when Li Yingying was about to say something, she did not forget to grab her arm and cover her mouth with one hand, so that she could not speak. As Shin Yueji expected, the man's snow-white robe was pierced by the sword and his left arm was injured. Blood immediately flowed from his left shoulder. Your Highness. She knelt in front of Shin Yueji with lingering fear. It's all my fault. It's all my fault for not being considerate enough. That's why. I almost harmed His Majesty and you. I'm guilty. Please punish me. Chapter 421. I'm afraid he has already rushed over to help His Majesty. The sound of fighting outside was still going on. Feng Juqing was injured, and some of the men in black wanted to step forward, but they were hesitant. Li Yingying's heart was completely focused on Feng Juqing. so she naturally didn't notice the strangeness of the men in black. Sitting in the carriage, Shin Yueji's eyes were tightly locked on the group of men in black. Seeing their hesitation, her lips curved into a smile. Just as Li Yingying was hesitating about what to do, she half opened the curtain and revealed her head, which was noticed by the men in black. Immediately, many of them abandoned the young emperor and waved the sharp swords in their hands to stab them. Li Yingying was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale, and the color had long changed. She should have screamed subconsciously, but because of Shun Yueji's words, she found that she couldn't make a sound even though her mouth was open. Seeing Li Yingying like this, Shin Yueji almost laughed out loud. At the critical moment, she saw that the men in black attacked decisively and fiercely, with the posture of taking Li Yingying's life. Frowning, she immediately pulled Li Yingying's arm and used her back to block the attack. "Your Highness!" Li Yingying was shocked and finally cried out uncontrollably. "Jeer!" Not far away, Feng Juqing also noticed them when he heard this cry. The men in black attacked very quickly and didn't show any mercy at all. It was precisely because the person opposite him was Li Yingying that he planned to take her life with one sword, and then use Shun Yueji as a hostage. It was killing two birds with one stone. But he had never thought that Shun Yueji would actually hand over his back for a woman and bear this sword for her. For a moment, it was difficult to withdraw the sword. Until the long sword was almost about to pierce Shun Yueji's body, the men in black forgot to withdraw. A gust of wind swept past her eyes. Poochie, the sound of the long sword cutting into flesh. Shun Yueji was pulled into a warm embrace, and the man's muffled groan came from above her head. A faint smell of blood came from the man's body. Shin Yueji looked at the corner of the snow-white robe that was dyed red with blood, and tears immediately fell. "Your Majesty!" She was distressed and helpless, and even looked at the emperor in front of her with fear. "Your Majesty!" She was very careful, not daring to touch the wound on his arm. Her tears immediately fell. "Emperor, how could you be so stupid? This minister's concubine's life is so lowly. How could you use your body to block it? If something happened to you, what would this minister's concubine do?" She sobbed softly. Feng Juqing hugged her and stood at the edge of the cliff. They were cornered by the men in black. The scene from her previous life repeated once again. The man carefully protected her behind him,